right, let's dive into one of the biggest questions, maybe the biggest question in the book of Genesis. Why Abraham? Seriously, out of every single person on the planet, why him? We're going to do a little investigation today, looking into the story of one man whose life literally changed the course of history. So let's get right into it. I mean, really think about that for a second. The world is full of people. Why this one guy, Abram, who we of course come to know as Abraham, why was he the one to get the call? That's the big mystery we're going to try and solve today, piece by piece, clue by clue. So, where do we start our investigation? Well, the first clue seems to point directly to the character of the man himself. We're talking about his faith, and not just any faith. It was profound, almost radical, really. And his willingness to actually act on that faith, that's absolutely key to cracking this whole thing open. Just try to imagine the weight of what was being asked of him. Abraham's living in a world where everyone around him worships a whole host of gods. It's a polytheistic culture, right? And then, out of the blue, he gets this call from one single, unseen God who tells him to pack up and leave everything he's ever known. And what does he do? He just goes? No map, no 5-year plan, nothing. Just pure, unadulterated trust. And this wasn't just a one-and-done kind of deal. His entire journey was like a ladder of trust, with each rung getting higher and harder to climb. First, you've got the call to just up and leave your home. That's a massive leap of faith right there. Then you've got the promise of having a son when he and his wife are way past their prime. I mean, who would believe that? And then, the final, heart-stopping test, being asked to sacrifice that very son, Isaac. Each step demanded so much more trust than the last. You see, all of this leads to a really crucial idea about what righteousness even means here. It's not about being a perfect person who never makes a mistake. Nope. For Abraham, his trust in God's promise was his righteousness. It became his core identity. That deep foundational belief, that's what made him different. Okay, so that brings us to clue number 2. It turns out this whole thing wasn't just about Abraham's personal faith, as incredible as it was. It was also about his potential to be a leader. He wasn't just chosen to follow, he was chosen to teach. And check this out. This verse is just so revealing. It's almost like we get a peek behind the curtain, a direct look into the why. God straight up says the reason he was chosen is because he knew Abraham would be the kind of leader who would actually pass this whole covenant down the line to his children and his entire household. So yeah, his job description was pretty clear, wasn't it? This was way bigger than just his own personal belief system. He had a mission, a mandate, to build an entire culture, a whole family line that would be a model of what's right and what's fair. He was the very first link in a chain that was meant to stretch way, way into the future. All right, on to our third clue. And for this one, we kind of have to zoom the camera out. We start to see that this story, it's not just about Abraham or even just his family. It's about everyone. This was a plan with massive global implications. A lot of times when we hear the word chosen, we think it's about being special, an exclusive club, right? But this story completely flips that idea on its head. Abraham wasn't the end goal here. He was the starting point. He was the vessel for something so much bigger. And this promise, which he gets right at the very beginning of his journey, lays it all out. In you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. This makes it crystal clear that the ultimate goal was always universal. Through this one guy and his family, a blessing was meant to flow out to literally every single family on earth. Okay, so let's recap. We've got faith, we've got leadership, and we have a worldwide plan. Sounds pretty solid. But there's one last clue to uncover. And honestly, it's kind of a twist. It really challenges all our normal assumptions about why someone gets picked for something huge. And this detail is just, wow. It's pretty stunning when you think about it. The book of Joshua tells us that Abraham's own family, his relatives, they worshipped other gods. So he wasn't picked from this long line of perfect, faithful people. Not at all. He was called out of a culture that was the total opposite of the one he was supposed to create. So what you have here is this massive contrast, right? Our human expectation is that people get chosen for big things because they're already powerful or important, or they've got it all figured out. But the divine reality we see in this story is totally different. He's chosen from a humble, even kind of flawed background. His selection wasn't a reward for being the best, it was an act of grace, pure and simple. So let's solve the mystery then. Why Abraham? Well, all the evidence we've gathered points to 4 key things. First, he had that absolutely rock-solid faith needed to even start the journey. Second, he had the leadership chops to teach the next generation. Third, he was the starting point for a plan to bless the entire world. And finally, his less-than-perfect background is a powerful demonstration of what divine grace is all about. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. Abraham's story is this incredible example of how one person's trust, just one life, can kickstart a plan that ripples through all of human history. So it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, doesn't it? What does it mean for a single life to have a world-changing purpose? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me on this little investigation today.